regular meeting of the Board of Finance for May 14th, 2019. First order of business is to discuss and take action on the Noroton Fire Department ladder truck purchase. Bob?
Yes. We are looking to release funds from the apparatus replacement account. Our current ladder truck is a 1994 100-foot aerial ladder. Purchased, went to contract in 92, delivered in March of 94. The truck is now 26 years old. It's starting to show its age, its wear and tear, and we are looking to replace it with a new 100-foot aerial ladder at an estimated cost of about $1,075,000. The truck, when we bought it back in 94, was just under $400,000. So we do believe it still has some resale value to it. Probably guessing in the $40,000 to $60,000 range. We've done a lot of work. We did a lot of research in what we wanted to do with the truck. Did we want to refurbish it as it was? Did we want to take the aerial ladder off and remount it onto a completely new chassis or replace it? Went through, weighed out all our options. The refurbishment, to spend it, was going to cost us somewhere in the neighborhood of $300,000 or so. We didn't think it was going to be worthwhile because we're still ending up with a 26, 27-year-old truck that essentially goes out of service for a year while all the work gets done on it. And then we get it back with, some stuff done on it. The re-chassis of it essentially takes the aerial ladder off. They build a whole new body for the truck, remount the existing aerial. So we've taken the 26-year-old aerial ladder, putting it back onto a brand new cabin chassis, giving us no resale value of anything because nobody wants an old cabin chassis.
Right.
And no guarantees on a 25-year-old ladder. So after all our due diligence, we felt the best thing was to replace it. It's got a lot more safety features than we have currently. It's got a much better turning radius. In the 20 plus years of apparatus changes, we have gone from a current wheelbase on the truck is 252 inches. The new wheelbase is 236 inches. So they're able to shorten up the distance between the front axle and the center of the two rear axles, which increases our distance to turn in tight areas. Our current truck won't even turn through this circle here in the parking lot in one shot. So that's how it's a beast to turn.
So this one's going to be a lot more maneuverable for all the new construction that's being planned, and I see that you guys specifically have picked this truck so that you can get under the route line bridge and all of that.
Yeah, one of our challenges at Noroton is that our overhead doors for the firehouse are 10 feet high. So it assists.
Is that the main limiting factor for the height of the truck? Or?
That is the biggest limiting factor, because otherwise we'd have to really do reconstruction on the building, which kind of we didn't think was anywhere near cost prohibitive. And it enables us to fit under the other two railroad bridges in town, Raymond Street and Leroy Avenue.
Okay.
So,
Joe, just a point of information. I God knows I don't know anything about construction, but I'm here generally to support what you proposed. But I'm disappointed we don't know what the costs are to do those doors at 10 feet to whatever the recommendation would be.
So it was not only the doors, it's full construction on the building. Either we'd have to lower the entrance ramp, the whole entrance of the building, and be able to basically go almost from the post road back and drop everything down to be able to get it, and we'd end up with an unlevel floor between the base of the firehouse.
I don't want to get into that. I'm sure you're probably right, but in the absence of detail, we're taking it on good faith, but it would be nice to know.
And then further to his point, if you think about it, do we have the same door height limitations that the other fire departments?
No, Darien and Noroton Heights both have 12-foot high doors.
And they were designed that way? Or is that just no heights is the oldest?
Our building is actually the oldest of the three.
Yeah.
So the question is, you think about sort of town-wide apparatus, right? So one thing you could do is to say that the truck that needs to fit into a limited space, that we put that at one of the other two fire departments where they got higher doors, And those vehicles or apparatus for which that is not an issue, we would put that in road. So was that considered as well?
That is considered as well. We looked at other manufacturers, and the ability to be able to get where we need to get with the truck kind of makes it easy from where our firehouse is located to be able to get down the center of town pretty quick. From the Stanford side and up to the Heights.
It sounds like from what these guys have proposed, does this truck do everything that if you'd had 2 additional feet of garage door clearance, that you'd still pick this truck, or is this truck more expensive?
Right, yeah.
No, it is not more expensive.
Than it would be if you'd been able to get something that was taller?
No.
Okay.
And this is the same manufacturer that manufactured our current truck. We've been very happy with them. And the cost is actually based off of a purchasing conglomerate known as the HGAC, the Houston Galveston Area Council out of Texas. So everything has already been bid through them.
What's the useful life of the vehicle?
About 25 years.
Bob, if we give you the approval tonight, how long before the truck sees Darien?
It's March or April of 2020.
Jennifer, is this truck still, has it moved anywhere on our vehicle replacement schedule, or has it been sitting there waiting for this day? Is that all kind of as scheduled?
It's been carried forward for a couple of years now, right?
Yep,
It's
it's
saying
been-
this
We
year.
postponed it, right? This is.
So we've been working on it, and so it is in the 2019, it's been pushed into the 2019 replacement year. The estimated cost for this year was actually almost $1,215,000 was what I had estimated in the replacement schedule.
So this is less than what you budgeted?
Yep.
Okay.
And how does this Houston Galveston area council work? Was like you guys involved in this?
So, no, it is, so they bid pretty much anything and everything, fire trucks, public, any public bidding, they do a lot of, and we can tag off of their bids by town charter. All we have to do is become a member of it, which is a simple join up.
We did
Houston
something
Galveston,
similar.
you look good in cowboy boots. Get you a big old hat.
We don't have to go to Texas to even join.
We did something similar for a public works piece of equipment. I can't remember exactly what it was, but there was a purchasing group out of the Midwest that had an excellent price on it. So we were able to join that purchasing group and take advantage of their competitive bid and their good pricing.
Did you have to compromise in any way in figuring out what you guys were going to do? Is there any kind of limitation to what?
The only limitations that, we presented to ourselves with is the overall height, so that not only do we want to keep it in the firehouse, but we wanted to try and be able to make sure we can make the 2 lower railroad bridges in town.
Yeah, which makes sense.
Other questions, Jim?
Yeah, I was going to say, so this is the same manufacturer that you've already bought the truck from before?
Yes.
And it sounds like you guys have had good experience with them?
Yeah, we've had very good experience with them. It's the only ladder truck that we bought from them really, and but other towns have had great success with their other pieces of apparatus as well.
And like $1 million piece of equipment like this, do we typically negotiate like maintenance or warranty contracts, or like how do they?
There is do you remember what the warranty offered was? It's a 2-year warranty, I believe, and I think there's some maintenance included in it. The dealer that we deal with is out of Hartford, or East Hartford rather. They've been doing all the maintenance on the truck.
Okay.
Have you considered all the things that you need to have on the truck, and you think you got the full?
We have, and we believe we've got everything that we need on it. A lot of the equipment that we currently have in the truck is transferable. The stuff being replaced on it is like the ground ladders that are on the current truck will go sold with the truck, and we'll have new ground ladders on it. But some of the hand tools and stuff like that will transfer over.
And I know you said this is sized for some of these, like the 3 new developments that are coming in town, like they can reach the top. Like, just have you guys talked with, and have you been following like those plans? Like, is there anything else besides height of ladder, like things that we need to think about when you're buying this piece of equipment?
So our concern is not only the height, but the ability to reach the building, because you're not able to get up against the building. So when you take the overall height, I will take you back to our 7th grade geometry lessons of the hypotenuse of a right triangle. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. So the height of the building and then the distance that we are off of becomes what length of ladder we need to actually get to the top of the building.
Okay.
So, you know, a 75-foot high building, being almost 50 feet off, will need, you know, an 80-some-odd foot ladder.
Okay. And we're sure, like, this ladder truck, I mean, it's fully capable of holding an American flag when we win the state championship. No problem.
You can
holding
fly an
ladder.
American flag off it, absolutely.
Right. There's no other modifications you have to make to the firehouse or floor structure or anything to accommodate this truck?
You know, the only thing that we may have to change is how the overhead door opener sits from a traditional center mount like everybody has in their house to a side mount door.
Okay. Rob?
Chief, just a quick question. You said $40,000 to $60,000 resale. Is that somebody
No.
using it, or is that just scrap, like metal scrap?
No, it's it'll be sold to some other, you know, smaller department in a, you know, in an area where they can't afford to buy a new piece of apparatus.
Okay. Other questions? Okay, I'm okay with this. Motion to approve. Jamie, Rob? Okay. All in favor? Thank you, John. That's great.
Thank you very much.
Good luck with that.
Gotta get down to the road and take the fire department and do some redistribution.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Tom.
Yeah.
Bring that up. So Jim, why don't you just raise your point?
Hey, yes, just one thought. Just one thought is, like, you know, we've accrued $1 million. I think we have $2.5 million in the reserve fund now, and this costs about $1 million. Like, have we ever thought about, like, should we be passing some type of contingent bond resolution, like, in case we wanted to finance this?
Because it has a 25-year life, right?
Yeah, I mean, we can't finance more than 20 years, but I mean, it's definitely a long-lived asset. The current one is 27. I mean, I know it's part of a bigger conversation in terms of, like, do we fund over 20 years for a new piece of equipment, or do we bond? But
Well, and the bizarre thing, of course, is that we set up this reserve fund to collect the funds to buy these apparatus. So in a sense, that is kind of that's the financing part of all this. So to accrue all the money and then decide we're not going to spend it and we're going to borrow the money, then kind of what's the money in the fund for? So I get a little confused by all
Yeah,
that.
that's a bit of a contradiction, John, but unfortunately, and by the way, with the police vehicles, their fleet management program is very different. They're replacing what they have to.
what are they, like, every 3 years?
I think 3 years is, yeah,
That's what the
and
minute
it's,
said, yeah.
yeah, and they've really, and believe me, I've watched that, they've really done a good job. I think it's a lot of the vehicles. Anyway, with these longer lifetime vehicles and the replacement program, it would be nice to see a consolidated multi-department proposal around what they need, how we can use vehicles, switch them around, and do what is optimal for whatever they recommend. It's not our job. And then go back and review the replacement schedule against whether we hit the reserve fund for it, which we've taxed for, or we do a debt financing, a regular debt financing schedule, where we include those periodic vehicles that were on some, again, it's all an estimate. Fleet management been a bugaboo of mine for a long time. We do it by the seat of our pants.
Yeah, I mean, I was just raising it more just from not whether or not we need it, just in terms of how should we spend the money, and do we want to maybe?
Do we want to preserve the option?
Yeah, maybe we don't change it for this time, but I think going forward, it's something. Just a reminder. I think we said we would think about it.
We need to run down the fund,
Yeah.
you know, not replace the fund, and then start financing these larger purchases.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we could think about this over the summer. I mean, Jack who's here, he and I have been back and forth about these reserve funds and whether we need more of them or whether all this stuff should be financed. This reserve fund for fire apparatus has been in place for a very long time. So if we're going to entertain a discussion as to how to change that strategy, kind of like with fund balance policy, I'd like to spend some time thinking about it. Jennifer, do you have any comments on any of this?
I think taking the time over the summer to think about it fits well with the Board of Selectmen's charge to the Fire Commission and the fire departments to go back, take a look at this and rethink how they were requesting their funding.
Yep.
Making sure that these are the right years for everything. So they were already going to be taking a look at it, so I think this fits well.
Add this to the summer projects?
And going forward, do you guys need, in town hall, need to be more involved in these decisions and the bidding process and that kind of thing?
Kate is involved with reviewing specs that the departments put together. She's involved with putting it out to bid or how they choose to acquire it, through a purchasing cooperative or putting it out to bid. So Kate does have involvement, but
She brings
I think the
some
town hall
expertise, too.
relationship with the departments is still finding its way.
Well, I mean, the other good news, I mean, you read through the notes that they put together here, it's pretty thorough. I mean, these guys have worked on this for a long time to make sure that they've got the best deal, the right company, the specs they need. It's an excellent memo, so, okay. But let's take that up at summer. To Jim's point, though, do we need some kind of resolution that just provides flexibility so that this could be bonded if we decided to do that as part of the summer effort, or what do you think about that?
You can do that. It'll have to go through all three boards.
Right.
To give you the option, but we will, then the next time we go out for a bond issue, probably want to make the decision of yes or no, are we gonna bond it? We don't want that authorization hanging around for too long.
In terms of the decision to bond need to be made before you spend the first dollar, is that correct?
Yes, except for certain reimbursable expenses, or within, I think, like 60 days.
And when do you think they would actually start to meet generally
Commit
speaking?
$1,
Yeah.
probably. They're pretty ready to go. If they don't have to bid it and they go out through this Houston Galveston group, I think that they could move fairly quickly, probably a month or so.
And I don't want, particularly because this is being bought out of a reserve fund that we have contributed dollars to over a long period of time as a vehicle to level out the impact on taxpayers. I mean, that's kind of the whole point of bonding and everything else, is to take these large expenditures and level load them onto the taxpayers over an extended period. So we've checked that box in terms of funding this reserve. So I wouldn't feel bad if we said, tell you what, for this truck, let's let this ride and fund it out of the reserve as we had planned to do before this discussion, and then pick up the notion of these reserve funds as part of our summer homework to think about all that. So I'd be inclined to do that, unless you guys think otherwise. Okay, let's do that. Okay, item number 3, discuss and take action on bond appropriation and bond authorization for Oxford Elementary School replacement for $3 million. So there's a note in here about this. This is sort of the opening expenditure that we need to get prepared for, that is going to cover a lot of sort of pre-project spending. And they've got a list of those things here that the $3 million would be intended to fund. So it's going to include a variety of things, as they say, from site survey updates, marking of the wetlands, hazardous material testing, traffic study, groundwater testing, in addition to architect fees. You'll note that earlier, I guess it was the end of last week, we have selected SLAM, which is going to, I forget what their acronym stands for, but they are the selected firm for architects for this project. They had a superb presentation. I think they're going to do a really fine job. But the building committee has spent a lot of time interviewing, I think, 6 different firms, and to boil it down to this firm, and I think it's going to be an excellent choice. Anyway, we need to get this funding in place so that the project moves along and meets the timeline that's required for us to apply for state grants. The other big request that's going to come up pretty soon is going to be an RTM resolution for full funding of this project, because one of the things that we have to have in place in order to qualify for all this is you have to demonstrate there's been appropriated funding for the project itself. So the committee is still working on exactly what that request is going to be, but when they do that, it'll go to the RTM for approval this June. So they're going to be asked to approve an amount that encompasses everything we could envision spending on this school. And again, it's not for purposes of that's going to be the actual dollar amount. It's really to qualify for these grants, and they're not trivial, as Kip Coons has said in some of his earlier updates. these are going to be an important part of this project that we need to actually take full advantage of to the maximum extent possible. So that is going to be coming, but in the meantime, this amount that we would bond would be for the startup expenses, and it's described both in the memo as well as in the bond resolution itself. Does anybody have any questions about this?
Well, one question I have is, for some reason, we didn't proceed with the project, would these still be bondable expenses?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't have to see the project all the way to completion. Whatever we've done under this umbrella is bondable.
And I guess, are we going to set up, because I think we do need to bond within a certain amount of time of approving it, right?
Of approving it, no. Of spending the money, yes.
Right, okay, so are we gonna set up a little block?
Yep,
just for
it'll
like- for
it'll
this
move over
account?
onto that report. Yep.
Perfect.
Do we have any idea how long it takes to process the grant at the state?
I have not been involved with that. I know that the building committee has gone up and met with the state. I think they've done a lot of research on it.
Yeah, to be determined. That all is still in process, but we do have expertise supporting us on all this, so they're not going to make any mistakes in terms of what needs to be done back when. I mean, that's part of the reason for getting this bonding in place and then the RTM funding for the entire project, because they know what's going to be required to make sure that we're qualified for those grants and we haven't missed something. So I'm pretty confident about that work. It's part of the reason I actually went up to Hartford to talk to those guys directly. Other questions?
The $3 million, I know it describes, how do we come up with the 3 million? Is it like 600 for architectural, 200 for this?
I don't know what SLAM's actual
didn't see
proposal
the
was,
final
but
bid.
I think most of the design proposals were $1.5 to $2 million. I think they were around in that range. So the bulk of this would be for design dollars. You did do a transfer from contingency of $10,000 for testing. We'll move that over. We'll reclassify over here, and when we close out capital projects, that'll go back. So there'll be any pre-construction site testing that they need to do as well. But the reason it's written to include construction in this language is if anything is unspent from this $3 million on kind of that preliminary work, it can flow into the construction phase and be used for that.
Right. All right, so 2 questions. So in terms of like this 3 million here, once we approve it, and then the RTM approves it in June.
The $3 million the RTM approved last night.
Oh, sorry.
So you guys are the final approval.
So once
on
we
this one.
approve it, it'll be then solely up to the building committee to actually spend it, right?
Yes.
It'll be, they can spend 0 to 3 million right away.
Yes.
Okay.
And then what we'll do when they have the final number is you'll get a resolution. You meet after the RTM in June, so you'll get a resolution that amends this to increase the
For the
scope to
full
include the full
Yeah,
construction.
so that'll be in June, right?
Yes.
Okay, so this isn't going to be outstanding such that we could spend the full 3 million and then get to June, not have the thing be approved by the RTM? Right?
It's conceivable.
A low probability that in the scheme of things. So, but again, since Jack's here, I mean, one of the things that's important is to make sure that we have a good discussion of this. There's going to be a very thorough discussion of the appropriation we'll need to put in place to enable all these grants. But there's going to be an ongoing dialogue, not just with F&B, but with the whole RTM on this whole process. So.
Right. So you're giving permission for the building committee to spend up to $3 million on any of these activities. The plan is that they'll work with the design firm to come up with a construction estimate, probably not as firm as we would all like, but because of time constraints, they'll get something done with that firm to come up with a number.
And the rules committee has agreed to put this on the June meeting.
We have
Rules
draft
meets May
next,
20th.
But we will have a very busy June meeting, so how we line things up is going to be very important. We will have the resolutions on the reserves. We're going to have the Oxford Building Committee. We're going to have the bag ordinance. We're going to have Highland Farms returning, and we're going to have the acceptance of the gift for the track. So, I would propose, although I'm only one member, that this comes before the bag ordinance. So it makes for, because that will be a very long meeting, I believe.
You want to delay the theatrics around the bag ordinance?
I am on camera, so I will not be making any comment.
All right.
I would like the state actually to do what they were supposed to do, which is to adopt the California plan, and then all the towns' bag ordinances go away.
Okay.
I guess,
What else?
John, my only thought, I'm not sure if everyone agrees with this, but I would just I'd want to make sure if we're approving this, that the full project is coming pretty quickly for full approval, because it would be, right, it'd be a shame to approve this and then not have the other one drag out and not get approved.
Well, I would say that we would delay this and simply approve it with the full amount that we're actually going to approve, except that these architects need to get started on this work. Well, Kip can talk a little bit about this. Kip, we had just kind of delved into this whole issue of the $3 million bonding, so your timing is literally perfect. Please, come on in.
Thank you.
So, as I was saying, I mean, it's conceivable you could take this $3 million and simply wait until we get the main bond authorization for the project, but again, not to steal Kip's thunder, we actually do need this money now to get the architects started on their work. The timeline for getting everything lined up so that the school can open on time is extremely tight. And literally, we can't lose a day on some of this stuff, so that's why we were putting this up for approval now as opposed to waiting to mid-June.
Well, they need the appropriation, if they don't need the funding.
Well, correct. So anyway, I think everyone knows Kip is one of our selectmen, and he is co-chair along with Duke Deneen of the building committee for the Oxford School. He's given presentations to F&B as well as to others about the progress on that committee, and it's great to have him here to talk a little bit about this. Kip, we're discussing the $3 million bonding resolution for this Get Started money on architect's fees and other things. And maybe you'd like to provide a brief overview of what that was. I think Rob had a good question about how some of the budget amounts were determined, and you'll have a good view on that as well.
We're still developing the budget.
Well, there you go. Not a precise amount.
No, I mean, this is sort of like a tale of two cities. It's Hartford and Darien, and they're very, very different. I'm not sure whether everybody knows the background, but the quick background is the Board of Education determined they wanted to build a new school last March. They put together a series of ed specs. They came to the Board of Selectmen in September, said they wanted to build a new school. Here are the ed specs. Will you please form a building committee? We worked on the command charter for that particular committee. It was formed by the end of January. We've been working ever since. And what we're trying to do is to move this along as quickly as we can, because everything seems to take forever. More importantly in our timing is that with regard to receiving school funding from the state, you have one time a year that you can apply, and that's June 30th. You miss that date, you wait for another year. There's no exception. School funding under Governor Lamont and whatever else is being proposed up in Hartford will probably be a lot less attractive to our town and towns like us after this particular fiscal year. The reason is currently our reimbursement rate, and it gets very complicated, but call it 11% for the sake of just an easy number to think about. 11% of our building cost, not 11% of all of our costs, because some of our costs aren't going to be included in that number. If we wait till next year, a year from now, besides having another delay of a year in starting construction and all the process that goes with it, it's likely that the reimbursement rate the towns like Greenwich, Darien, Duquesne will drop to 5% or less. Or it may not exist at all if the budgets are such that they want to divert more money to the transportation area, and less money to schools like, towns like Darien, where they want to favor schools that are being built for regional purposes. That seems to be the new flavor. So we're really trying hard to meet the June 30th deadline for a state grant application. Now, unlike our garage project, in which we started out by hiring an architect, doing all kinds of testing, started with a conceptual design, then you go to schematic designs, then you go to design development, finally you end up with construction drawings. You take those and you take them out, and you've done your estimations all along the way, take those to subcontractors for bidding, you approve your bidding, you then decide you sign a guaranteed maximum price contract with a general contractor, with a construction manager. And that's when we presented, when we had all that in line, we then went to the RTM and asked for an appropriation. You can't do that under the state's rules. You can't even go out to bid a contract if you're going for the state money. You must first go to the state. You must go there probably without even a schematic design. As a matter of fact, we're going with basically just ed specs, which is bizarre, and they will estimate what the building will cost using their numbers. It's all based on the number of square footage allowed per student, per class, per grade, size of school. It's better than the IRS. And when they finally determine what it is that they think your school should cost, because they use $365 a square foot after they determine what the square footage is on their basis. And of course, we don't bill for $365 a square foot down here. They will then determine what the site costs are, which are not included in the reimbursement rate. They're a different number, and all the other things and escalations. And they'll say, okay, here's your total cost that we think you should spend for a building of these many square feet. And right now we're at 90,000 square feet from the ed specs. Then they apply a formula. Right now the formula for us is 10.71% of eligible building area. With the building of the early learning facility as well, we get an extra 5% bonus, maybe, on that section only. So we've done some quick math, and it looks like maybe our reimbursement rate might be 12%, but only if we hit the deadline of applying by June 30th. So we're going to basically go back. We've hired an architect. We went through a complete, we had 11 people apply. We had 6 people who interviewed. We brought it down to 3. We gave them each a project, the same project. They came back with designs answering that project. It was all about how would you site a school building on that project, because it's a pretty tough site to work with. Consider you have to have the school building going while you're building a new one. Very interesting ideas, and we chose an architect. We're in the process tonight, right now, interviewing construction managers. We had, again, about 8 came in. We cut it down to 3. We're interviewing 3 tonight, and by Friday, excuse me, we will choose a construction manager. We want both in place now, because when they work now in the planning stage, it's the most productive and the most cost-effective way of planning a project. We avoid the famous, change orders. So we're going to put together a package of information, get it to the Rules Committee of the RTM, ask them to be put on the agenda for June 10th, and come up with a number. And that number, the architects have already given their kind of rough, they give us 4 designs each. They think, well, it's from here to here. If I had to make a guess, it's going to be in the mid-50s or higher. That's $1 million to do the project, total cost. The state will look at it as a lesser number, and they'll give us, maybe if we qualify, they'll give us 10.71%, or maybe with the ALP a total of 12%. for those costs that are approved. We've hired a consulting firm that specializes in taking you through the state grant process. It is so complex, you need a pathfinder here. And he's been very good, cut through a lot of the stuff real quick. We've hired other specialists, which we had to hire a traffic study, site survey, hazardous material firm, a firm doing geotesting and testing for all the water and where the old septic field was. Right now, I think that's all I can remember. We may have one other, but all of these are required. And we're also in the process of dealing with the MU zone change or not, how it would affect the property. So there's a lot of variables going on. We are committed to hitting that deadline of June 30th in asking for a state grant, because we don't think there's going to be much available, it would appear, if we hit it a year later. And also, we'll lose a whole year, because when you ask for a state grant, you cannot start the construction bidding process until after they've both affirmed that you're going to get the grant, and then they have the right to look at all of your drawings along the way and confirm them. So we want to see if we can hit this grant deadline this year. And that's why we're going to go back to the RTM, and we're going to ask for an appropriation, which is going to be, in all honesty, it's going to be a swag. It's going to be an informed swag. It's not going to be a totally, in the dark swag, but we're going to be asking for money, and we're hoping that through the process we get in the future, as we work through all this, the conceptual designs, the schematics, the design development, and the construction drawings, that we're going to bring in this project less. But we don't want to have the situation we had before, where you say, well, we'll bring it in for here, and all of a sudden you find out it really costs here, and then all the finger pointing and accusations begin. We are going to go back to the RTM when we're all done with the process and say, here's where we are. We got it right to the construction drawings. We have the bids in. Here's what our guaranteed maximum price is. And if we're over, I hope we're not. I don't think we should be. We'll have to explain it. But otherwise, we think if we have a cushion in there, we would then hopefully come in under and meet expectations.
Well, we're going to be pretty fulsome in this request. I don't expect that the
It's
full
gonna be
project is going to be more than what the RTM would appropriate in June.
No, and the other thing about it too is the state, in their wisdom, in telling us how many square feet per student is allowed, then says after all of this, well, now you work up all your total square footage based on the number of students, grades, and all that stuff. And by the way, the number of students is based upon the highest enrollment expected in the next 8 years. Now the enrollment was just redone by Malone McBroom in November. So Oxbridge is coming in 8 years out at 428 students. But we also have early learning, which we're designing for 150. So take the two together, that's our total school population. They will then give you, the state will then say, okay, well now we will allow you a 15% upcharge or space charge for your common areas, your hallways, your cafeterias and all that. Maybe we want a larger gym than the state would allow. So maybe we'll have to spend more. More meaning that the state will say, okay, but that's on your dime. Well, in some cases, the state says, no, you can't spend more. We want all schools to look the same. They also have to come down, and this we've been pushing them very hard. They only have 2 architects, by the way, in the entire state Office of State Construction Grant and Review. 2 architects. They have to come down and tell us whether the building can be renovated or rebuilt according to their standards. We're assuming it's going to be a rebuild. So we're waiting for that. We're pushing them on that too. So when you ask the state for money, it's a lot of strings come with it.
We're not renovating this building.
I would agree with you, John. I mean, it's just terrible. It was designed in a California architect.
Extremely helpful. Any questions for Kit in terms of the process?
Oh,
and what
I
we're looking-
guess the last thing I wanted to say, John, I'm sorry, is that I have a preliminary, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna be putting together a package of information, which I have not had the time to do, given last night and given the fact that we just hired the architect. A package of information that will go to the Rules Committee for them to give to the F&B and the Education Committee. I will provide that to the Finance Committee as well. But this is an example of for example, a preliminary chart of the timing. And the goal here is always to have the school open for the kids, brand new, by September of 2022. Can we improve on that? I don't know. Because you have 16 months really where you have to do all this design development. And we're not doing design development, all these drawings on our own. We have to go back to the state each time, have them look at them and approve them. So there's all of that, back and forth. And it depends upon the people we hire. And it's one of the things we're asking our construction manager and the architects. What experience do you have filing with the state? Do you know them well? Do you work with them well? Do you know how to expedite the process?
Yep. Very important. Well, we don't want to keep you from the construction manager interviews, which I myself am missing. Call.
Having been through this myself, and if it's not too much difficulty, could you document the process and show it to our legislators and show them what a mess it is? And in Governor Lamont's impetus to create a simpler government, show them this mess. Because I've had to wrestle with people up in Hartford about getting construction approved, and it's intolerable.
Well, do you happen to know Konstantinos Diamandis?
I know the name, yes.
Well, he told us that Lamont listens to him.
Okay, well,
Well, that's a good thing to document and send to every legislator and the governor.
Not yet.
yeah, we don't want to make anybody mad.
This man controls
Well,
the person.
the perverse good news could be, Paul, that there'll be no money left and we won't need to go through the process. So just be mindful.
Yes,
Well,
that's,
the idea that we have to hire a grant manager to lead you and your committee through the process is ridiculous.
Oh, but I would agree, but if you're dealing with a very complex area of the IRS code, like, for example, oil and gas depletion, you better hire a good attorney and a good tax guy. And we're hiring a good attorney and a good tax guy in this case. And it hasn't cost us very much. 5. That's not much.
okay.
Okay.
Good job,
So
Gil.
what's the experience of schools in the area in terms of, districts in the area in terms of getting through this process?
It varies, Frank. The Greenwich High School, which I believe was completed 4 or 5 years ago, I'm not sure exactly. They just got their last payment this year. They were so bad at submitting their payments and change orders and everything to the state because they didn't have this guidance that they got way behind. Now, we literally thought when we started this process, there's no way we're going to make for the state deadline because we're not going to have a conceptual drawing, we're not going to have all that stuff. And then when we turned to this guy, actually we talked to 3 different consultants. They said, you're very far along, believe it or not, because you have ed specs, you've got all this stuff that's been done. Then we went up to the state, and this guy, Constantine, he said, oh, you guys are really ready. Now, I mean, what is he, lacking customers this year, so we're the ones? I don't know. But the answer is that a lot of schools have had very mixed results by having poorly documented. And of course, as you know, this is a bureaucracy game. And if you don't submit the documents the right way, you go back and you do it again, and you do it again, and you do it again.
So how much of it do you have done today that you need, for the package you need to actually submit?
I would say that we have the ed specs that are done. I think the Board of Education, we have a brand new enrollment. Those are the 2 key factors. The enrollment study was done November 11. We have the architect on board. So we haven't got the contract, but we've chosen the architect. And we have, what was the last thing we have to have? Oh, no, we need the RTM authorization. You have to have full funding authorization when you go in, with no drawings. I mean, it's really bizarre. It's completely the flip side of how you do business.
We'll get there. Rob, did you have a question?
Just a quick question, Ken. I think the state's budget starts July 1st for 2 years, right?
Right.
So is the theory get this in before June 30th, it's still the rate from the
Correct.
previous, okay.
That is correct. That's what he's telling us.
Okay.
He didn't say what was gonna happen next year, but he sort of said, you know, it doesn't look like it's gonna be as positive going forward.
Right.
And he said, we have the money. You know, that's
It's a good thing.
what he said.
So the amount that we asked the RTM for, is that going to be for the gross amount or netted off of what we're guessing?
No, we're gonna ask for the gross amount. You have to have a full funding request. You don't go in thinking you're gonna get so much, because you may never get it,
Yeah,
or you may get cut back.
They just want to make sure that there is an RTM, that there are appropriated funds that are well in excess of what we need to do with this project.
Exactly.
That's what we want.
And one thing I should add that I didn't, because it's what John's been insisting on our committee, is there will be built into this project expansion space. We're not gonna get caught with a situation where we build a school and in 2 or 3 years, we've gotta go back and find more space. We're not, I mean, that's gonna be a cost, but I think it's a well-planned, well-designed cost.
Okay, good, thank you. Jack, did you have something?
I just wanted, the meeting for the 3 million went very well with the RTM. And one of the statements we said is that, we sort of held Kip back because he's gonna be the superstar in June. But the fact of the matter is one of the things that we said last night was, we don't get state funding. There's a significant decrease in state funding. If we don't get it, we're costing our taxpayers millions of dollars, because the cost of the building is not going to change. The only thing that's gonna change is if we don't get it on time, we're just throwing money out the door. And that's the message we're sort of giving to the RTM.
But are we guaranteed, that just because we submit the application doesn't mean we're definitely getting the money, right? They could run out and we could just build the project without.
But if
The
we
answer
don't
is-
do it, we're guaranteed that we may not get it, so.
Okay. All right, I don't want to keep Kip from his interviews. Is there any other pressing matter to raise? Kip, thank you. Appreciate you coming here. Thank you very much.
I'll get you the package of information I give to the Rules Committee, so you'll have the same documentation. Sorry, it wasn't ready yet.
All right, thank you, Kip. Okay, so we need to vote on the resolution here, which is part of the stapled package, for a resolution appropriating $3 million for the planning, design, construction of a new elementary school in the town of Darien, and authorizing the issuance of bonds and notes in the amount of $3 million to meet said appropriation. Can I get a motion to approve that? Bob? Second, Frank. All in favor? Okay, perfect. Okay. Next item is discussing and taking action on the first selectman's salary. Senator.
Well, I'd like to say first that you all have in your packet a spreadsheet. I want to thank Lori Dunn for both preparing it for us, and then we asked her for some additional variables that would be added. So it's a pretty complete, I think it's complete, of the drivers that we want to consider. Just a little background that I think would be helpful. This will be the third time, I guess, I've been involved in doing this. So we were way behind. Way behind. We were on a relative basis, if you look at this chart. I'm tendering a guess here. I believe we were at $85,000.
I think that's right.
4 years ago when we first made a proposal to increase. Certainly it was my intention at that time, based on what we saw, to take a couple of steps to get our first select person in the relative ball game. So we've gotten there. The last time we did this, I think we brought the salary into a relative position. What I would like you to, and I commend you to look at this closely, for me, my eye goes to Greenwich and New Canaan and the nature of what are both peers and are real comparables, because what we need to think about is, I'm thinking about compensation work I do in my consulting work. We use the term span of control, which is sometimes total budget, it's sometimes full-time equivalent employees. There's a lot of variables that go into span of control. But we have an administrator here, as does New Canaan and as does Greenwich. And we want to take that into consideration as well. So to some degree, the burden, the span of control is alleviated somewhat because of that important town manager. And so take that into consideration. So I think we're close. When we were in our last discussion, we actually were close to an agreement, I think. I'm not sure why we were looking for more detail. We were running out of time, John, a couple months ago.
You'd asked for more details from Lauren, so.
But, my sense is I think we're close, and there should be some kind of increase. I'm gonna let the group, meaning I'm in favor of an increase. I'm not sure where to set the increase in terms of a percentage. And I think what we're doing today, because I think we're close, is we may be, and I'm not sure if anybody's codifying or anybody will go back and look at the minutes, because I didn't look at the minutes 2 years ago, but I think we should be doing something that would allow something that would be both equivalent merit-based increase, tenure-based increase. There's lots of rationales for it, but something that would be above what would be a cost of living adjustment, meaning the cost of living adjustments we're seeing right now in industry are maybe 2.3, 2.5, and something more than that. I think that would be material that would bring it into its right place. So I'm not sure if that brings us as a percentage or a dollar figure number, but it's something north of a cost of living adjustment. That's where I'm sitting.
I guess another thing I would say is that decouple this from any notion of it being merit-based or tenure-based, simply because this is for the first selectman as opposed to the incumbent.
Those are your rationales in industry, or promotional increases the other.
Totally right. So what we discussed last time, before we got the additional information, which maybe we can touch on in a minute, would be that we take it from 130 to 135,000, which optically, when you compare with the other two towns that you mentioned, which are both town manager towns, those towns are at 144,000, 147,000 respectively. So we'd be under those two towns, but certainly closer to it. A $5,000 increase is about a 3.8% jump. And anyway, that's where we would be. Anybody have any comments or questions?
Is this an annual raise, or is it a raise for the term?
We consider this once per term, I think is correct.
Yeah, and we do it prior to the election.
So then if it is raised to 135,
That would be
it's for the next 2 years?
Correct, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And what's Kate's percentage been?
Last year she was in with the non-reps, and I think the average was around 2.3, 2.4.
2.3.
Yeah.
And that's a per year?
Yes.
So we're effectively setting a 2-year salary.
Yeah.
Correct.
You could dollarize it or a percentage. 5% increase is 6.5. The $5,000 increase, did you figure it was 3.8?
1.7 per year.
We're on the margin tinkering right now. This was a substantial 2-step increase that got us where we are over the last 4 years. So,
Yeah, so I mean, this would be a small increase. It seems simplistic in terms of picking 3.8% or 5% or $5,000. I mean, it seems simplistic. On the other hand, I'm not sure what else to say. I mean, I'd prefer to keep it a round dollar amount. That seems to make sense. And 135.
And a 1 through 5, 041?
Yeah, well, right. And this is kind of right in the middle. It doesn't put us up over either of those two towns, but gets us closer to that zip code. And that seems like a reasonable figure to me.
Yeah, John, I just did a little bit more background. There was actually a really interesting discussion about, I'm not sure, goes so far to be in the category of moral hazard, Frank, use your lexicon. But we were so low, I think it was affecting the population that might consider running for the work done. I mean, so, you know, I'm very comfortable that we're in the right place right now, and there should be an increment.
Unless there are any other comments, I would suggest maybe we take it from $130,000 to $135,000, kind of per our earlier discussion, which would be a 3.8% increase for this next 2-year period. Could I get a motion for that? Sandy? Second, Jim? All in favor? Okay. All right, thank you. Okay. Item 5 is to close out some inactive funds. So you'll recall this was from some work that Jack and F&D initiated, which was to take a look at our balance sheet instead of just the operating expenses, where typically most of our focus is. And the purpose of this exercise, as he led it, was to inventory all those different funds and analyze them, particularly focused on determining what's the age of these funds, how long have they been sitting there, how long have they potentially been inactive. And the idea here was to close out those funds that met their purpose or were no longer active, and to get that cleaned up. But importantly, to put in procedures for tracking new funds that come into the town, so that we don't lose track of them in the future, like some of these funds has been the case with some of these funds. So there's a few of them that we are recommending that we close out in this note that Jennifer wrote. Maybe Jennifer, you can touch on this briefly.
Right, so there are 3 items that require your action. Closeout of the Superstorm Sandy Revenue Fund. Money was transferred from the general fund. We've paid all of our expenses, we've received all of our reimbursements, and there's $215,000 sitting in there. We can close that out and move that back over to the general fund as unassigned fund balance. Then we have 3 old funds, animal control, waste disposal, and waste management, which were set up for specific purposes. They've been inactive for years. They show as assigned fund balance within the general fund right now. Closing them will move almost $195,000 from assigned to unassigned fund balance within the general fund. And then the stadium field fund, there's a small $1,350 balance hanging there left over from donations that was not moved out. We're proposing that it be transferred over to the reserve for capital non-recurring, where the turf replacement project was just completed.
So, did any of the funds that went into these accounts come from like other governmental bodies that might have restrictions on them?
No, the stadium field fund was all donations. Animal control, waste disposal, and waste management, it's my understanding that we actually used to run expenses for those functions through these funds. So, actually one of them was setting up a reserve fund to stabilize tipping rates.
Yes.
Which has never been used, and the money's just been sitting there dormant. Animal control, we used to actually run the animal control expenses through there. And then Superstorm Sandy was funded initially from the general fund, and then there were other reimbursements, like FEMA and insurance reimbursements that went in there.
And the reasons that they were set up as designated funds from the get-go was in order to segregate some portion of the general fund for a specific need?
Right, just to take those functions, have them be their own self-sustaining fund, and then actually a few years ago when fund balance, GASB changed their fund balance categories and how you had to account for those. These were still on the books and they got shifted into this assigned world. Okay. And so we don't use them, the money's sitting there, let's get it out of the assigned.
And it's not legally restricted to...
No, it's strictly, the town had set them up for a specific purpose, so they were considered assigned.
Kudos to Jack and F&D. They really took the lead on doing this, an important cleanup, and so thank you for spending the time on it. I think this was extremely valuable. In order to clean these up, we actually have 2 separate resolutions. that we need to vote on, and then finally a transfer for the stadium field turf funds for $1,350. The first resolution is for the $215,746, different than the $747 in the memo, but we'll go by what's in the resolution, is that correct?
Yeah, that's the
Okay.
questions.
So this is the Superstorm Sandy Revenue Fund. So closing that Superstorm Sandy Revenue Fund and restore the final balance of said fund to the town of Darien general fund and the unassigned fund balance. Motion to approve that resolution, Diane? Second? Rob? All in favor? Okay, that's the first one. The second one, authorizing is misspelled at the top.
I just saw
About that. So this is a resolution authorizing closing the Animal Control Fund, Waste Disposal Fund, and Waste Management Fund, and moving those over to fund balance. And she has in her note here, the total of that is $194,552. So a motion to approve that as well. Senator? Second, Diana. Okay, all in favor? Okay, great, thanks. The last one is a transfer, $1,350. This is transferring, transfer out to other funds and to the replacement of the stadium field turf replacement fund, $1,350. Jamie?
Point of
I'm
information.
sorry, please.
On a procedural matter, why are we discussing this?
It's crossing funds, so Kate and I don't have administrative authority to do it.
Excellent question, because we have tried to minimize all that, that's fine. But thank you for following the rules that we set up. I like that, actually. when
Making
people
you follow the rules.
Yes, a constant struggle, okay.
To make sure I said, so the limitation is she can do under those amounts within a given, for an appropriations within a given fund.
You restricted it to within the same department. Kate and I cannot cross departments and change
Yeah,
that.
that's right.
And I think that's reasonable, because the stuff that you want to clean up is within departments, and that's where we have so many small budgets that allow them to manage themselves, that we're really looking at an aggregate number, whereas this is moving stuff between them, so I think that's right. Okay, motion to approve this transfer. Rob, second. Diana, all in favor? Okay. Financial report.
I feel like a broken record. Revenues are doing very well. The property tax collection, we have exceeded the budget by $64,000. And April revenues actually were not available at the time of the report, so we prepared a little bit earlier than usual. So that is through March, we're $64,000 ahead of budget. On the expenditure side, there are a couple items that I'm keeping my eye on. One is our paramedic contract. This is, I think, our second year of the contract, maybe the third. They did have a change in billing companies, and there's been a delay in some of their collections. So they have a $14,000 deficit in that account through the first 3 months. They're seeing the collections come up now that the new billing company is kind of fully up and running, and the whole process is up and running. We can offset about $10,000 of it within the department budget, but I do expect that after we get the fourth quarter bill, we'll come back to you and we will need to make that account whole from contingency.
Okay.
Unless they get a lot of collections in the last couple months. The other one we're keeping an eye on is legal. This report shows legal bills through 9 months, because we do have a lag from when they close out the month and send us the bill. So it is running a little hot. We've encumbered the retainer, we've encumbered expected land use expenses, but we may need to supplement this budget as well. And then the last area that I wanted to let you know is in either June or July, I'll be coming to you to move salary funds out of the employee contingency. We're going, because we've moved all of the unions and non-rep moved to arrears, we're actually saving 1 week of salary on everybody. But we've given as we've moved people to make them whole, they've had the option to buy back up to 5 days of time. So where we may have some savings in the salary accounts, those are offset by any retroactive payments, but we've also increased our accrued benefits buyout. So we'll be making salaries whole, making accrued benefits whole in either June or July. Our last union to move to arrears and get retro is the police department, and that's occurring on June 7th. So we might not have those numbers for you in June, but it would be in July.
Is the legal counsel being driven in part by revals, or is that in a separate budget?
We are not seeing much from reval yet because that's kind of just going into effect now. I think they've received notice of several cases or suits, but I don't think we're not actually seeing the expenses for that yet. One other item that I want to call your attention to on page 5, state revenues. The special ed excess cost reimbursement, as of April 30th, we had taken in almost $2.6 million. I checked the state education grants website. We are expected to receive $3,427,000 for the year.
Okay, so again, substantially higher than what was budgeted.
Yes.
Did you say 3.4?
Yep.
That is less than last year.
Right, last year was 3.7, I think.
Right.
And what's that as a percentage of what was submitted, do we know?
That I don't know, but I can ask for you.
Because that's like the key, right?
Yeah, that's
It's not
a good
really how much
point.
you got last year, it's how much you submitted.
It's also, it's not just the percentage. What it is that as this rate goes up every year, you have students that are dropping out, and as you go through the IEP and have the assignment, students that you might think have it don't. So, and then you have new students that do come in, which is part of the reason why they are also getting more. So it's a mixture of the two.
Okay. All right. Anything else on the financial report, Jim?
Should I just
Any
quick thing,
questions?
sorry, John,
Please.
back to the states for 1 second. On ECS, it says we received 511,084, and in the comments it says expect to receive 430,059. What am I missing there?
Don't know. Let me take a look at that.
Okay.
I pulled that off of our ledger. It could be that we had something booked in the wrong account.
And John, what did you say the total amount of the expected excess cost reimbursement was?
$3,427,518.
Other questions? Okay, thank you. We have on here also approval of minutes, and Diana has asked that we table that until the next meeting to provide a bit more time to go through it. It's kind of a long list of minutes, so we will pick those up at the June meeting. All right, special assignments, committee reports. Our committee, I guess not much else to talk about in terms of the Oxford Building Committee. Kip gave a pretty wholesome update, but we'll have things to report out of that committee almost on a daily basis for quite a while. So lots of work to do there. Jim, maybe you think on public works or on cafeteria, you could close all that out?
Yeah, the final small things that need to be done, including painting the pavement outside and a couple small trim inspections inside, were done last week and are being done this week. And so we have our last meeting on the 31st, and we should close out with somewhere between kind of $40,000 to $50,000 being returned back to the general fund, which is money with a contingency that they did indeed.
Great.
So
Just
all in, what did it turn out to be? Like $1,009,000? $1,007,000?
The budget was $1,951,000, so it sounds like they're gonna end up around 1.9.
Yeah.
And just for clarification, what does go unspent, we have fully bonded that, so say there's $50,000 remaining. You as a board can choose to reallocate that to another project that's approved for bonding. So last night, RTM approved the Hindley roof, we could move these already borrowed funds over to Hinley and borrow $50,000 less for Hinley. The appropriation would remain the same, we just wouldn't have to borrow as much.
Correct.
And can we use those for debt service as well?
That is possible. I can talk to bond counsel and see what's preferred. So yeah, then it becomes, do you want to free up money in the general fund or do you want to reduce future borrowing? So I'll check with bond counsel, see if there's a preference.
Frank, anything on your end in terms of work that you're doing? Anybody else have anything else on that?
I'll have more to report up here too next time around. We can
Okay.
do this tomorrow.
Okay, chairman's report. I actually don't have anything to report for the chairman's report. So I think we're in relatively good shape as we wind down this fiscal year. Thanks to everyone for a successful budget process. I know we still got a few things to cover in the June RTM meeting with regards to Highland Farms, but it looks like we've ended up in a good spot. We probably ought to debrief where we ended up in the budget process at the June meeting once all this gets settled. So more to come on all that. Any other business? I think we are done. Motion to approve, or a motion to adjourn? Rob, second, Diana. All in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you, friends.